ever wonder what happens when holy things, well, go wrong? It seems like a simple question, but the answer opens up this absolutely fascinating world of ancient logic. I mean, how do you get rid of a sacred object that's been spoiled? You can't just throw it away, right? In this explainer, we're going to unpack how ancient Jewish law came up with some incredibly precise and honestly pretty surprising answers to this exact problem. So yeah, let's start right there with the core dilemma. Imagine you've got something set aside for a sacred ritual, say wine for an offering, and then it gets contaminated. You can't just toss it in the garbage, can you? It's holy, but you can't use it either. This isn't just a practical mess, it's a real spiritual puzzle. And the stakes? They were incredibly high. We're talking about the ancient temple in Jerusalem, which was the absolute center of Jewish ritual life. In a place like that, the line between pure and impure, sacred and ordinary was razor thin. One little accident could throw the whole system of worship off kilter. So maintaining perfect order and sanctity was, quite literally, everything.
Okay, let's dive into our first puzzle. This one comes straight from the pages of the Talmud, and it's all about a sacred wine offering, which is also called a libation.
So the process starts out pretty straightforward. Grapes are grown, wine gets made, and then it's officially consecrated, set aside for a holy offering at the temple. But then, whoops, something goes wrong. As you can see there in step 3, the wine becomes ritually impure, and its sacred journey just gets cut short.
So what does ritually impure actually mean? Well, in Jewish law, it's a very specific status. An object gets this status when it comes into contact with something that makes it totally unfit for the temple. In short, it's disqualified. Game over. So what do you do now?
The Talmud gives us a really clear answer from a sage named Rav Huna. You don't just pour it out on the ground. No. You have to build a special fire, a totally separate pile of wood, right there in the temple courtyard, and you burn it. You have to notice the precision here. This isn't just about getting rid of something. It's a specific, deliberate counter-ritual.
Okay, this seems straightforward enough, but in the world of the Talmud, the what is always connected to a why. The sages don't just make up rules out of thin air. They figure them out through really careful interpretation and logic. So where on earth did Rav Huna get this specific instruction?
And here's the twist. The source for how to deal with impure wine isn't a law about wine at all. The rule is actually derived from the laws for something totally different, a meat sacrifice. This is classic Talmudic reasoning. It's all about connecting the dots between things that seem separate to build one big, consistent system. This right here, this is the key. It's a verse in the book of Leviticus, and it describes exactly what to do with a sin offering that gets disqualified. The rule is totally explicit. It has to be burned in the sacred place. So Rav Huna sees this, and he makes a brilliant logical leap. His thinking goes something like this. If this is the rule for one type of disqualified offering that goes on the altar, then it must be the principle for all of them. So a rule that was originally for a meat offering gets extended to cover disqualified blood, oil, flour, and, you guessed it, our wine. This creates this just beautifully consistent and logical system. Now, this idea of consistency wasn't just some minor academic point. Oh no. It was considered so important that one of the great sages, Shmuel, insisted that it had to be taught in a very specific way. And that brings us to this number, 10. Shmuel actually tells his colleague to gather a quorum of 10 men, what's called a minyan, before he'll even teach this halacha, or Jewish law. Why? Because this wasn't some little footnote. This was a foundational principle for how the entire sacred temple space worked, and he wanted it taught publicly, with authority, to really cement its importance for everyone.
All right, time for our second puzzle. We're going to shift from disposing of a holy object to cleaning one, but you'll see that the same kind of razor-sharp logic is at play. This time, the problem is a blood stain on a priest's clothing.
So just picture it. A priest is performing a ritual, and some of the holy blood from a sin offering splatters onto his special garments. The Torah says the garment has to be washed in a sacred place. Okay, simple enough. But, of course, there's a complication. It turns out there are actually two totally different categories of sin offerings. First, you have eaten offerings, where the blood was sprinkled on the outer altar and the priests got to eat some of it. Then you have internal offerings, where blood was brought way inside to the inner sanctum and the whole thing was burned. Nobody ate any of it. Now here is the legal challenge. That verse in Leviticus, the one that says you have to wash the garment, it's written in the section talking about the eaten offerings.
So does that rule also apply to a blood stain from an internal offering? Or do we have two different rules for two different kinds of blood stains? This is the kind of stuff the sages live for. The Mishnah, which is like the earliest foundational code of Jewish law, tackles this head on, and its solution is a total masterclass in reading closely. They solve the entire puzzle by focusing on just a few incredibly powerful words from the original text. And here they are. Torat HaChatat. In English, this means the law of the sin offering. Now, the crucial detail here is that the word law is singular. The text doesn't say the laws, plural, of the sin offerings. It says the law. And that right there is the brilliant solution. The sages conclude that using the singular the law was completely intentional. It's a signal that there is one single unified legal principle for all sin offerings. It doesn't matter if they're eaten or internal. So yes, the garment has to be laundered in both cases. The system stays beautifully consistent. So after untangling these ancient legal puzzles, what's the big picture here? I mean, it's clearly about more than just some spoiled wine and stained clothes. It's really about a whole worldview, one that deeply values precision and a search for these underlying unifying principles. In this system, every single detail matters. A single word in a verse can unlock a massive universal principle. Logic is the tool they use to build a coherent structure out of all these seemingly random rules. And the ultimate goal isn't just about following rules blindly. It's about protecting the integrity of the sacred by creating a framework where everything has its proper place and purpose. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? You know, we might not live in a world of temple offerings, but I think we all look for ways to create order and meaning in our lives. So what can this ancient focus on consistency, on finding the deep principles behind the rules, what can that teach us about how we build our own systems of meaning today?